Hello, good evening, and thanks for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on News Nation. We're going in. That was the message today from President Trump, suggesting National Guard troops could soon be heading to Chicago.
These were people from Chicago. Please, we need help. We need help. We can't walk outside. We're petrified. Now, we're going to do it anyway. We have the right to do it because I have an obligation to protect this country. And that includes Baltimore.
The president also suggesting that's not the only major American city on his radar. Is the National Guard about to be Baltimore-bound as well? Plus, what will the president do about Vladimir Putin? The commander-in-chief teasing a major reveal here in the coming days. And as he spoke from the Oval Office today, Congress returned to the Hill. Their first order of business, the Epstein files, when they could be released. Also tonight, opening the door. Will the Trump administration soon declare a national emergency on housing? Why one top cabinet member suggests that might be around the corner. But first tonight, here from the Hill, the Windy City windup. President Trump not saying when, but he didn't make it sound like it's an if either when it comes to the National Guard and federal involvement in Chicago. Speaking from the Oval Office today, the president saying it is his obligation to protect the people of Chicago and employing the Illinois governor to join his own viewpoint.
I would love to have Governor Pritzker call me. I'd gain respect for him and say, we do have a problem, and we'd love you to send in the troops because you know what? The people, they have to be protected.
Now, these flashing lights from police, this was just 4 scenes over the weekend in America's third largest metropolitan city. In total, from Friday through Monday over the holiday weekend, 37 separate shooting incidents in Chicago. 8 people were killed, and as the bullets flew, 50 more people victims of gunfire. For example, down here, this scene right here. That's the 3600 block of South Cottage Grove. As officers responded to a disturbance, gunshots were fired a short distance away. 5 people, including a 17-year-old boy, were struck. The Illinois governor today, though, doubling down, saying he doesn't want the National Guard in Chicago.
First, I want to address the president's unhinged remarks a few minutes ago, begging me to call him. No, I will not call the president, asking him to send troops to Chicago. I've made that clear already. Chicago does not want troops on our streets.
Mick Mulvaney, Dan Cannon here with me in a moment, but we begin tonight here on the Hill with Congressman Sean Casten, who is a Democrat from the greater Chicago area. Congressman, thanks for being back with us tonight here on the Hill.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, you heard both sides there. You heard President Trump. You heard the governor there of your home state. Do you need help in Chicago as you see it?
We absolutely do not need federal help with boots on the ground. I mean, look, Chicago law enforcement worked closely with the DEA to prosecute drug crimes. They work closely with the ATF to prosecute gun crimes. Those things, of course, happen. But the idea that we're going to make communities safer by sending the National Guard in, who I would remind you is subject to the jurisdiction of the governor, not the president, who's not up to speed on those and make people safer, that simply is not how you solve crime. This is the way you create security theater. And, you know, yes, there were some shootings in Chicago last weekend, and that's tragic. Every loss is, of course, tragic. But the overall trend line is down. And make no mistake, the single best predictor that you are going to die from gun violence is that you live in a community with a high percentage of gun ownership. The highest per capita rate of gun deaths in the country is in Wyoming.
I think, how can the average person sit back, see what happened in Chicago this weekend, and then hear someone like yourself say, you know what, we don't really need any help, we've got it?
The crime statistics are coming down in Chicago. Of course, you're going to have periods where crimes happen, but I would point out what I said before. There is a higher rate of gun death in Wyoming than there is in Illinois. Why is the president not making a big deal about people dying in Wyoming? Why is he not making a big deal about people dying in Indiana?
You're the congressman from the Chicago area. Why wouldn't you want any help? That's what I can't understand.
Because federal troops are trained to go into hostile situations and fight bad guys. They are not trained to go in and figure out how to do the hard police work in a scenario where most of the people you're surrounded by are good guys. Law enforcement is very different from the military. There's a reason we have a Posse Comitatus Act that you don't send the military in to do domestic law enforcement. We have had in Chicago, in the last few months, a collapse in reported domestic violence crimes. Those are crimes. Those are real victims. People are getting hurt. They're not reporting because they don't trust the federal troops who are out there, the ICE officials, what have you, to do the kind of community-based policing that they trust their police force to do. That makes us less safe, not more safe.
The mayor of Chicago.
This is sending the entirely wrong tool.
The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, said, yeah, sorry, there's like a second delay here. I don't mean to step on you, but the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, said this today. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Work we do or how hard we work, none of it will ever be enough until the president decides to end the mass trafficking of guns in our city. Chicago will continue to have a violence problem as long as red states continue to have a gun problem.
Why should anyone in Chicago believe, Congressman, that this issue will get solved or fixed when the leader there blames the White House and the opposing party?
What the mayor said is true. 60% of all gun crimes in Chicago are done with guns that are trafficked in from out of state. What the White House has done is made it much harder for us to identify those guns and traffic those guns. If you go to the ATF right now in Morgantown, West Virginia, you will find ATF officers who are taking all their time digitizing records and eliminating any identifying information about who the person was in that record so it can't be searched in an electronic database. That is because you have an administration that is prioritizing the ability to get guns in our streets and kill people and not prioritizing protecting people from those guns. What the mayor said is absolutely right. If the federal government is going to do something about gun crime in Chicago, we need to address gun trafficking rules. I've actually tried to pass a bill, I've introduced it for the Gun Trafficker Detection Act, that would say that anybody who loses or misplaces a gun has to report that it's been lost, and if they don't, they'd be liable for those crimes. I haven't gotten any Republicans to join me in co-sponsoring that. Why wouldn't you? If we're being told that guns don't kill people, people kill people, why aren't we cracking down? Why are we not allowing the ATF to track that information? And I don't always agree with the mayor of Chicago, but on this one, he is exactly right.
All right, Sean Casten, Democrat there from the greater Chicago area, with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir. We'll talk to you again. Joining me now, Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation contributor, former Trump White House chief of staff, and Dan Cannon, former Battleground States director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. Hello to you both. Happy Tuesday. Hope you had a nice weekend. You sat back there with your hands folded. Why?
You know, from a political standpoint, I know there's a lot to talk about from a practical standpoint, a substantive standpoint. From a political standpoint, that's a disaster. You can't do that. What I heard was...
Well, you just heard from the Congress.
We are underreporting domestic violence because the victims are afraid that the untrained federal workers won't do the community policing necessary to solve the problem. Wrong. That you just lost every single person who cares about domestic violence. That's psychobabble. That's a talking point.
Agree with that or no?
It was a little too wonky for my taste. Look, I think Democrats have to come in and say very clearly, crime is a problem in big cities. It's also a problem in Louisiana and Arkansas and certain Wyoming, as the congressman pointed out, but it's a problem. Even though it's been going down for several years, it's a problem. But here's the thing, Blake, that I think the mayor tried to say, and I think Representative Casten was trying to underscore, is that federal troops are not designed to be law enforcement agents on the ground. ATF, DEA, city police, county police, state police have that jurisdiction and that training. And there is a very prescribed and smart way to get tough on crime and go after drug traffickers, go after the drugs. In Chicago, all those murders and killings are happening on the South Side.
Isn't there a value, Dan, though, to sometimes just a show of force? Don't you just feel better and safer if you see people on the street? I feel safer at Union Station just by having the police there. I don't care if they're trained in law enforcement, if they know how to report domestic violence.
And there's an alternate reality that we don't live in right now, where the president wants to actually partner with these cities and these states. And he calls them and says, hey, I want to get tough on crime. You want to get tough on crime. How do we do this together? And if you actually had that partnership, you know what you wouldn't do? Is cut $500 million in ATF agents, 2,000 personnel. You wouldn't cut $1 billion in the state budget of Illinois, which is going to force them to cut law enforcement personnel on the ground. And then, without talking to anyone in the state, send in your guys to walk around and talk and have uniforms around monuments instead of actually going after the guns and the drugs.
But if you want to be president of the United States, and Pritzker's thinking about it, Newsom is thinking about it, you know what happened to Gretchen Whitmer just for going in the Oval Office. If what you just said happens and Donald Trump says, hey, look, guys, I know we've been fighting in the past, can I help you? Can I send you some folks? They're still going to say no, because if they say yes, it reduces the chances of them winning a Democrat primary.
By the way, the president today suggested Chicago is not the only one. Baltimore could be next. Roll it.
No federal troops in the city of Chicago. No militarized force in the city of Chicago. We're going to defend our democracy in the city of Chicago. We're going to protect the humanity of every single person in the city of Chicago.
Obviously not President Trump. Here's the soundbite that I wanted to roll. Governor Moore called because I watched him over the weekend trying to explain that Baltimore, what they need is housing. You know, they don't need housing. They need to get rid of the criminals. The point is, Mick, that President Trump telegraphed today that he's not done beyond D.C. And the question is it just that he's going and mentioning the areas like Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, Westmore, Maryland, who we know those guys want to be the next president of the United States?
I heard the president say the same thing, and I know they would like to be able to go into Baltimore, Chicago, pick a city, but I keep coming back to this. Washington, D.C. is different, and it's going to be much harder for them to do what they would want to do. They can't do what they did here in Chicago. Yes, you can send in the National Guard, but it has to be in support of federal agents. There's all sorts of limitations on federal authority when it goes into the cities. So it's not as simple. I know what they're saying. And I think one of the reasons you heard him say he didn't commit to a timeline is I don't know if they know how to do it.
Why didn't he commit to a timeline?
Because I don't think they figured out how to do it yet.
When do you think that time? When do you think it happens?
I got to think they're working on it. I mean, some of this is going to get worked out in the courts, which is where it should get worked out. Does the president have authority to do X, Y, and Z? That's one of the reasons we have courts. But I don't think it was much easier to do here. I think they're hoping they send a message by what they did in Washington, D.C., but I don't think they're ready to do the same thing.
Thanks, guys. See you later in the show. Dan, Mick, appreciate it. Still to come tonight here on the Hill. Why the Epstein files were front and center up on the Hill today as President Trump made a military announcement over at the White House. The emotional response from one member of Congress who was in the room with the victims, plus the president and Putin. What Trump says he will soon reveal, and is the president threatening to declare another national emergency? Why he has his sights on part of the American dream. I thank you for being with us tonight. I'm Blake Berman. Don't go anywhere. Other side in 4 minutes.
The U.S. Space Command headquarters will move to the beautiful locale of a place called Huntsville, Alabama, forever to be known from this point forward as Rocket City. Okay?
The president today announcing a new home for the U.S. Space Command. And across the city, across the town, Capitol Hill, same time this afternoon, a much different scene on a topic that has been a bit of a thorn for the president. Members of the House Oversight Committee meeting with victims of convicted sex offenders Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. The South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace leaving the meeting visibly upset, saying later that as a survivor herself, the victims' stories were hard to hear. The House now set to vote this week on a resolution directing the House Oversight Committee to continue investigating the case. And just moments ago, announcing the release of new records the committee received from the Justice Department. It comes as some members push for a vote that would force the administration to release more files. The House Speaker, Mike Johnson, earlier today.
We want to bring justice to every single person who was involved in the Epstein evils of the cover-up thereof, but we also want to be equally certain that we protect the innocent victims.
So are we hearing dueling voices from the White House and the Hill? With me now, Congressman Mark Harris, Republican from the great state of North Carolina. Congressman, thanks for being back with us. Hope you had a nice summer break. You and your colleagues are back here in Washington. I couldn't help but notice the president having that event in the Oval. Congress is back, and then all of a sudden it's Epstein all over again. Is that just going to consume the attention in this town?
Well, I certainly hope it doesn't continue in this town. I think that we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to do the things that we need to do as Congress. There's a lot of steps that are already taking place. I find it fascinating that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to talk about Epstein over and over and over again. because the reality is that they had 4 years under the Biden administration to talk about this. And really, I think it's playing politics. I think we need to get back to the business at hand. The president's getting a lot of wins, and I think that disturbs my colleagues on the other side.
So the reality is, Congressman,
to create somewhat of a distraction.
The reality is, I saw the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, before the cameras talking about this today. So this is front and center.
Sure.
And it begs the question, how does this end and when does this end? Do you think the files get released by the end of the year?
Well, I think that the information is still coming out. I mean, there's over 34,000 pages of documents that have been placed in the hands of the Oversight Committee at this point. President Trump has instructed Attorney General Pam Bondi to give whatever information that she can give legally. I think we all want to get to the bottom of this. We all recognize that Jeffrey Epstein was probably one of the worst pedophiles in our history. And all of us want to make sure that those that were associated with him, that were involved in any of this criminal activity as a pedophile, are held accountable. And we all believe that. But I think we've got to make sure that we follow the processes in place. And as you heard, Speaker Johnson did speak to it because we've got a situation we're dealing with here on the House floor. We have an opportunity to follow the process, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. So more information is forthcoming as it continues to see.
The president wants a crime bill. Does that get done?
Oh, I hope it does. I think when you look at what has happened with crime in D.C. Over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I think it's something that we definitely want to see get done. The steps that have been taken in D.C. are providing an example or a role model. Over 1,600 arrests, over 159 illegal guns seized. That's something that all of us ought to be celebrating. And even from what I understand, 4 missing children have been rescued. So what's happened here in D.C., I think, has really made a great, great message that can go to all of our municipalities across the country. And now we've just got to begin to see how that plays out. So the conversation is happening. 81% of the American people have said crime is a major problem in this country. And I think the appetite is ripe for us to begin to have that conversation.
Mark Harris, Republican, North Carolina, with us once again. Thanks for being here on the Hill tonight. Talk again soon, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. With me now, Mark Short, former Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence, and she is the national political reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester. Mark, Julia, hello.
Hello.
I couldn't help but notice, right, like the president wanted to get on message with the Space Command today and the big announcement, and it was the exact same time as they're doing all the Epstein stuff up here on the Hill. And I guess it begs the question, Mark, of how much this is going to consume Congress and what's going to be able to get done going forward here.
Well, look, the president has an enormous capacity to be able to change the news cycle, and he does it very effectively. I think the White House probably hoped that when they delayed this, that through the summer they created a lot of news throughout August and sort of pushed the Epstein story back down. But, you know, they're the ones that sort of lit this flame. There were plenty of J.D. Vance interviews of promising to release them, Pam Bondi interviews promising to release them, and then basically coming up with the notion that there are no files and incredulous stories that they're really Jim Comey and Biden created. And so they've sort of created this, and I don't think it's going to go away until they actually release the files.
I mean, look, I think this is going to continue to be a thorn in the president's side going forward. However, you know, it's something he has to address. He has to address. The Republican Party has to address it. There's a large portion of the MAGA base or the conservative Republican base that, you know, wants these files released and wants more files, wants them released and to be as transparent as possible. But the question is, are they going to be satisfied with this first trove of files or the other troves of files? I mean, we have to understand, like, some information may be redacted, our names taken out, et cetera. So this may be something that won't go away for the president.
What are you watching going forward here? Because you got the president talking about a crime bill. They got the government funding battle, another few months left of the year. What are you watching?
I mean, I think government funding is huge. I mean, that's going to be a big obstacle for Republicans in Congress. We saw Johnson, you know, get over that hurdle, a hurdle that a lot of people didn't think he would be able to get over earlier in the summer with the mega bill. But government funding is that next step. up. They can't do it, at least in the Senate, without Democrats. So that's something to look out for.
I think government funding has been a battle for us for quite some time. I think it's interesting that the White House has already signaled their support of a continuing resolution. And so I actually think they'll get past this. I think the bigger issue will be later in the fall. I think the administration is anxious to fight the Impoundment Act. And so we're fighting over this rescissions package, $5 billion. I think it pales in comparison to what they want to do in rescissions later. I don't think there's going to be a crime.
Yeah, you're bearish on that.
No, there's no chance. But I think
no chance.
No chance. But it's a good issue for the president to keep bringing up. Like if Democrats keep getting back in a corner and saying, "Hey, really, crime isn't that big a deal in Chicago. It's not that big a deal in Los Angeles." This is a great political issue for the president. But with this thin a majority, I mean, getting the one big beautiful bill was the legislative vehicle for this year. It's not another big bill like that's not going to happen.
Mark, see you later in the show. Julia, thanks for coming on in.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks for having me.
Catch you later in the week. All right, still much more ahead. Here on the Hill, Putin, Xi, Kim Jong-un. How about that group? Why all of a sudden they came together and what the president could be doing about it when the Hill returns. 6:30 here on the East Coast. Live look over at the White House as clear lines are starting to begin to form on the global stage. How about this? The North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un arriving in China to attend a military parade commemorating the end of World War II alongside Xi Jinping and alongside Vladimir Putin. And just yesterday, the Russian and Chinese leaders were also seen embracing India's prime minister in China as well. This on the heels of President Trump's meeting with top European leaders to discuss ending the war in Ukraine. Fast forward to today, President Trump's deadline for Putin to make progress toward peace with Zelensky has now passed, despite what the president called a productive meeting with the Russian leader last month. Now, Russia has continued to pummel Ukraine. No trilateral meeting between Trump, Zelensky, Putin on the calendar, as far as we know. It's unclear whether or not President Trump will follow through with his threat to impose stiffer sanctions and tariffs on Russia. Here was the president today.
I had actually a very good meeting with President Putin a couple of weeks ago. We'll see if anything comes out of it. If it doesn't, we'll take a different stance.
Maybe we'll take a different stance, huh? With us once again, retired Lieutenant General Richard Newton, NewsNation senior national security contributor. Hello, sir. Always great to have you in. I'm just I ticked through some of it, but I'm looking at this. Putin and Trump meet, and then all of a sudden I see on my screen over the weekend, wait a minute, he's with Xi and Kim Jong-un and Modi, and they're all palling together, and I'm thinking to myself, General, that doesn't look good.
Good evening, Blake. It's not a good scorecard. Putin's had two red carpets, one from President Trump and one from President Xi, and he's been on the world stage constantly, as you alluded to, for the last 2 weeks. All eyes now are on China, and they just concluded a very successful, in fact, the largest economic summit, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit that they do annually. This is the largest one, and tomorrow they will have 26, heads of state to include, Putin and Kim Jong-un and so forth, to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Japan. By the way, they're going to call that defeat. It's a Sino-Soviet defeat of Japan in World War II. But they're also going to allow for the opportunity to show China's vast modernization of their military capabilities much farther along than they were 10 years ago during the 70th anniversary. So this is a very significant week.
I guess it leads to the question, if you feared that Putin was coming to the U.S., getting more out of it from Trump than Trump could get out of it from Putin, is that what happened, or is it still TBD?
Right now, what you're seeing is a much more closely aligned relationship between Russia, China, North Korea. You can throw Iran in there also than we saw in the first Trump administration, where there are more individual adversarial relationships between the U.S. and China, U.S. and Russia, and so forth. Now you're seeing an alignment of China, Russia, North Korea, and that's what you're seeing on stage. That's very concerning from that point on. Also, look at the economic aspect of this. China purchases 50% of Russia's oil capacity, which is funding their war. Russia, in turn, in the first half, Blake, of 2025, received $1.9 billion worth of dual-use technologies from China that change their war machine capability for drones and for armored vehicles, for jet aircraft and so forth. And so as long as Putin feels he can stay on the battlefield, he doesn't need to go negotiate with President Trump or anybody.
Huh. Lieutenant General Richard Newton, News Nation senior national security contributor. Always great to hear your perspective, sir. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Blake.
Of course. All right, back with me, Mick Mulvaney and Democratic strategist Yemisi Egbawali. You've got a higher title than that. What was it in the Biden White House?
Chief of Staff to the White House Press Office.
There we go. That's a lot better. Mick, decode this for me. Tee up the first soundbite if we can, because here's what the president said today.
Have you spoken with President Putin?
Yeah, I don't want to. I have learned things that will be very interesting. I think in the next few days you'll find out.
Will there be any consequences if there isn't some type of announcement of a meeting with President Putin and President Zelensky?
Yeah,
and what could those consequences be?
We're going to see what happens. We're going to see what they do and what happens. I'm watching it very closely.
You saw what I just laid out there with the general, and then we get this from the president today.
Yeah, they got nothing. And what the general said is absolutely right, which is Putin is now of the mind that he's going to get a better deal by staying on the field than he is by going to the table. And this is diplomacy 101. This is sort of peace negotiations 101. No one cuts a deal at the table until they think they get a better deal at the table than they do at the field. And right now the White House knows that Russia still thinks that Russia thinks they're better off by staying in the field, and they don't know how to change that dynamic.
It strikes me that you say they've got nothing.
They don't have. Look,
I could take you literally or figuratively.
A couple weeks ago, what did we have? We had Trump and Putin meeting on a Friday. Okay, good news. I took that as a good sign. Monday, all the European leaders here. That's progress. We're moving relatively quickly towards something, right? And then what happened? Absolutely nothing. And with every passing day that goes by, that there's not some more dramatic development, it makes it less likely that it's absolutely going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, from a messaging standpoint, it's been interesting to see how stronger together plays better than divided we fall. I think if President Trump is watching these leaders meet, he's looking at it from the outside perspective. He thought that he could control them like chess pieces, and it's showing that he cannot. India's messaging on this has been really interesting. The papers have reported the meeting with Modi and Putin as a meeting of defiance. And that, to me, says that maybe they are stronger together.
I mean, Trump said something today in the press conference I thought was interesting. He said, I have a very good relationship with Modi, which was a true statement.
Howdy Modi. I remember that in the first term when he came over here, there was a big thing.
I was heavily involved in setting that up. And then Trump actually went to India right before COVID. It was, I think, at the last trip he took before the world shut down. They had a great relationship. And when Trump says today, I've got a great relationship with Modi, I'm sitting there wondering to myself, you know what? I had some great relationships with girls when I was younger, but they didn't like me very much. It sort of takes two to tango, and I'm not sure Modi is there right now.
Agreed. I obviously worked with Modi when we hosted them for the state dinner and the visit during the President Biden's administration. And the thing is, if you treat people with respect, they'll get along with you. I think what he's done is tried to little brother world leaders who have been at it a lot longer than he has.
I don't know if I get the little brother thing. I do get why he's doing it. I think he's really upset about the oil. He wants to try and choke off Russia's economic lifeline so that they can't afford to continue to do the war in Ukraine. Again, do I get a better deal in the field or at the table? If I run out of money, then I want to run to the table. And India is helping Russia with money by buying oil. So I think his motivations are correct. It's just not working out right now.
Give me Trump's next move here.
He's got to figure out a way to break this. I mean, right, if there's four major sort of players in the world right now, it's five, okay? It's us, Europe as a group, Russia, China, and India. Who's with us right now? I mean, the Europeans were here, but they don't, it's kind of a tenuous relationship. I thought that Trump was going to try and cut a deal to get closer to China to sort of isolate Russia. And it's not working out. I thought he'd get closer to India to try and isolate Russia. That's not working out. He needs to change the dynamic, because right now, until something dramatic changes, nothing's going to change. That means this war in Ukraine continues.
All right. Hang around if you don't mind. Other side of the break. In his own words today, President Trump just may, declare a housing emergency. Think about that for a second. A national housing emergency. Is the president on to something here? If that's even the case, what does that even look like? We'll get into it. Other side.
is bringing more Americans together.
The appetite is greater than it has ever been for perspective, for understanding, and for information that they can not just trust, but use.
News Nation, news for all Americans.
Whether you're for him or against him, there is no doubt that the president is taking a lot of actions on many fronts these days: the border, deportations, crimes, emergencies as well that he says need addressing. And today he mentioned to take the possibly unorthodox step of a, quote, expedited ruling from the Supreme Court when it comes to an appeals court decision that most of his tariffs are illegal.
That ruling is basically saying that the trillions of dollars that are pouring into our country, putting us in a position like no country is anywhere in the world, that they'd like to see us that taken away.
And now, due to what's being called a housing emergency, President Trump could also be making it easier, we'll see if he goes down this path, to own a home. The Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, saying just the other day, in part, quote, "We may declare a national housing emergency in the fall." Goes on to say, "I think everything is on the table. I think we're going to see a big economic pickup in 2026. And the president was asked about this earlier today.
Right, we're thinking about doing that.
Yeah, can you just...
Well, we need a little help from the Fed. We have a man named Jerome Too Late Powell. You probably heard of him. He's too late. He's way too late. And the economy is so strong that it's pushing through that.
But what would a housing emergency even look like? The details there, it's sort of fill in the blank at this point. Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney back with me once again. So too is Mark Short, former chief of staff to Vice President Pence, director of legislative affairs in the first Trump White House. Yemisi Egbawali, former White House press office chief of staff, and Dan Cannonen, former battleground states director for the Biden-Harris campaigns. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. I'll get to this side in a second. You got your start in politics and sort of the housing land issue. Yeah. Is this a thing?
There's a housing crisis. There's no question about it.
No one denies it's a big issue.
Housing emergency. I don't know what that means, but I do know it's caused the housing crisis. So if Donald Trump wants to declare a housing emergency so that he can force state and local governments to allow more housing to be built, I'm all for it. My guess is it's a way to open a door to additional tariffs on things like lumber. So I'm not really sure.
Well, Bessent suggested that they might take those off. Those sort of materials.
I don't know what a housing emergency does. Look, I feel partially responsible because we figured out a way to get additional presidential authorities in the first term because we declared an emergency at the border for illegal immigration. I think we were right to do so because of what we were facing at the time, and that opened the ability of the president to spend different sums of money on building the wall. That's fine. I know what an illegal immigration emergency looks like. I don't know what a housing emergency looks like. What are you laughing at, Short?
Preach, Mick. I mean, I think the reality is that there's a lot of his executive actions we can applaud. I think he takes strong action like he did with the Venezuelan drug runners today, or even securing the border, as Mick said. But it used to be that our party believed and trusted in markets to handle the economy. And yet I've never seen a Republican administration that wants to seize the means of production faster than Mamdani wants to take over grocery stores. And so we're going to declare another national emergency to take over another parts of the economy.
At some point, there's going to be a Democratic president, and I would think that you could then do a national emergency on climate, EVs,
media,
whatever you want. Fill in the blank, I guess.
There was a very large push in Biden to have a national emergency on climate.
On climate, right?
He did not do, largely because I think it was a question of like, what does that mean, and what do we take action with that authority? Look, I think the problem with Trump that he has, besides the fact that he's massively underwater in the economy, he's at 37% approval on the economy versus something in the mid-50s or early 50s. In his first term, and he's underwater across all the issues on tariffs, on costs, on affordability. The American people do not think he's doing enough to address his prime promise in the election, which is to tackle costs. And the other thing that Trump 2.0 is compared to 1.0 is it's the Trump show. He banished anyone in the administration that might disagree with him. And he hates it when the Supreme Court or the Fed or anyone says he can't do something. So all of this power grab stuff that Mark and Mick don't like, it's about Trump just wanting to do what he wants to do, whether it solves the problem or not.
So I actually thought the most important sort of little, not little, it's big, piece of information that came out today, Yemisi, was who will not be taxed on tips. Show the couple graphics. Bartenders, wait staff, gambling dealers, dancers, entertainers, performers, ushers, baggage porters, maids, housekeepers, you name it. You're going to see the professions here, and it makes me wonder that when that starts to filter through the economy, if that is how the president then tackles the economic issue that he has right now.
Well, I don't think no tax on tips is going to make anybody any closer to being a home buyer. Look, the age for home buyers.
For some folks, I mean, if you're paying less to Uncle Sam, that's money in your pocket.
Maybe. I mean, the age for home buyers has dropped dramatically. I mean, people my age aren't even able to even think about owning a home. And I think part of that is he hasn't done anything that's cost effective for it. I mean, tariffs on lumber and steel. Last time I checked, that was the basis of even starting to build homes. So I'm not really sure what declaring a housing emergency does. Does it lessen tariffs on those things so that we can build more homes? I think it's great that he's going in the vein of Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. I think the abundance movement is something a lot of people on the Democratic side are talking about. So it's great to see the president join in.
What about when that filters through the economy, Dan?
Well, we'll see how many people actually get what's promised to them. I think a lot more folks are promised and believe they're going to get this windfall that's not going to materialize. And at the same time, they're going to find out that some of the cuts to Medicaid were, in fact, real cuts. They'll have a harder time getting their insurance. The cuts to state and local government. We talked about Illinois earlier in the segment. There's $1 billion less in that state budget, which is going to filter down through property taxes and other things. The economic hits of the big, beautiful bill and the tariffs have not even fully realized, which is why I think he's in such big trouble, because if he's at 37% when it hasn't really smacked home for folks, it's going to get much worse for him.
At the same time, the counter to that is that the pro-growth pieces of the bill haven't kicked in yet either. So there is the yin and the yang. I disagree with what you're saying, but if I agree with it, I can say, yeah, but a lot of the stimulus factor from the bill hasn't filtered through either, so you still get a chance to see that.
Tax relief was terrific. I just think, unfortunately, his trade agenda is offsetting much of the benefits of the tax relief. It'd be nicer if we went back to a flatter and fairer tax code as opposed to setting aside carve-outs for different industries to say, hey, if you're paid in tips, you don't have to pay taxes.
But at the end of the day, there's 500,000 fewer jobs created in the first 7 months of Trump than in the previous 7 months of Biden or the comparable 7 months before that.
Yeah, but is that apples to apples?
It is.
Not COVID, though, in 2020.
Oh, but I'm saying in this 2025, month by month, 85,000 jobs per month for Trump, 160,000 a month under last year of Biden. That is apples to apples any month when you look at it. And the market roars back with approval whenever he looks like he's going to back off his own policies. The American people do not trust him on the economy, and the real hits from the bill have not hit the.
Well, that's why I wonder if when this stuff comes, if it moves the needle or not. Does it move the needle or no?
I think what'll move the needle is he backs off on his trade agenda. I think the reality is that, Kevin carve-outs in the tax code, I don't think is going to get it done. I still think a lot of Americans would trust President Trump over Joe Biden on the economy. But I think the concern is that right now it's hard to make long-term investments because it's so you don't know what it's going to be today versus tomorrow.
I'm just afraid there's actually somebody down there going, Mr. President, what we really need to do to solve the housing crisis is that we need to take an ownership interest in some of the publicly traded home building companies. And I'm not joking. I mean, someone clearly has made that case on semiconductors. They made the case on critical minerals. They made the case on steel. I wonder if there's somebody down there, and I don't know who it is, but I'd like to find them and get them in a dark alley who said, Mr. President, what we're really doing is having the government own the home builders. That would solve all of the problems.
I'll give you the last word here.
I don't know if no taxes on tips is going to be enough. I think that at the end of the day, his trade policy has made such a dent that I hope they're able to climb out of it before we get to midterms.
All right.
I hope the Democrats become free traders after this.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill. We were talking about this I told you that I was going to get to college football. I told Short.
We're going to stay for that.
But I bet you didn't. I bet you didn't think that this was the part of college football that I was going to tell you about. You know what this scene is?
Yeah. This guy saved the kid in the fire.
It's unbelievable. We're going to explain this story on the other side of the break, plus what's trending as well when The Hill returns. Just 3 minutes out to Elizabeth Vargas' report. She'll speak live to the FDA Commissioner Marty Makary about President Trump's request for drug makers to, quote unquote, justify the success of COVID-19 vaccines. That's coming up right here on News Nation. All right, if you're just getting home tonight, trying to catch up on the big news of the day, here's some of the stories that are trending right now on thehill.com. This is something clearly that the White House is watching. China's Xi welcomes, quote unquote, old friend Putin. Those two hanging around for the last couple days or so. How about this? A judge rules that Trump's use of U.S. military in L.A. is illegal. The president, though, today suggesting that National Guard troops could be headed to Chicago next. And this is a level of presidential trolling that I don't think we've ever seen before. The president says a portrait of Biden's auto pen will be unveiled at the White House. To check out those stories and more, all you have to do is scan the QR code on your screen or head on over to thehill.com. All right, it was a big weekend of college football. Time for my take now. Kicked off all over the country, and in some of the bigger headlines, for example, Bill Belichick's Tar Heels debut, total disaster. Oof. There could be a big trouble in Bama, potentially. The perennial powerhouse just got rolled over by Florida State, you could say. On the bright side, though, my Wolverines, looks like the true freshman phenom QB Bryce Underwood is the real deal. However, the most meaningful moment didn't take place on the grass or on the turf, but rather the pavement. I want you to meet Larry Pickett Jr. He's a second-year cadet at West Point and a safety for the Army Golden Knights. He was in his car after his first game of the year, drove up to the scene of a car crash on the way back to campus from a family dinner. And that's when Larry and his father pulled an unconscious driver out of a smoking vehicle that had just crashed into a utility pole, knocking down a power line. They got the helpless driver to safety, and just moments later, this.
Pulled him out of there.
Pulled him out of there. How about that? West Point posting to its social media that they were proud of the heroic actions from the cadet and his dad. Cadet and sophomore safety Larry Pickett Jr. truly living up to the mantra, be all you can be. I thank you so much for watching us tonight here on The Hill. I'm Blake Berman. We'll be back tomorrow. Hope you have a great one. I'll see you then.